Greetings. Welcome to Dr. Neil's Spiritual Awakening to Non-Duality. This is Dr. Connie Zweig, and I'll be interviewing my husband who lives in spiritual awakening. You may have heard about this or read about it, but you may not know someone who lives it day to day. We'll be exploring how non-duality developed in Dr. Neil as I've observed it over 25 years, and as he directly experiences it every day. Each podcast will explore a different theme. We look forward to you joining us. Here we are again, Dr. Neil's Spiritual Awakening to Non-Duality. And today we're going to discuss his evolution through the chakras. We've spoken already a bit about involution, his coming into incarnation and becoming a baby and beginning then evolution to higher stages of development and levels of consciousness. And that involution, evolution is the cycle of human life. So today we're going to focus on evolution of consciousness through the chakras as experienced in particular by Dr. Neil. So, Neil, let's start wherever you like.
Well, let me start with the process of coming into conception as a human being. This was a very important step, as I'd already been pretty highly evolved with consciousness. And in some ways, I had skipped some parts of my human development in India in order to evolve this way. And I became aware that I needed to go back through the human cycle and develop myself as a full human being to evolve to further stages and concretize them.
So let's start with the first chakra, or the root.
All right, so I'm coming into conception. I'm in my body, and I'm a surviving individual. My mother used to call me the sitting Buddha because I would sit and be happy just being in my body. That was the first sort of stage, and that was the root chakra, the first chakra at the base of the spine. This is part of the Vedantic or Hindu mapping of the energy cycles of the body. So the physical body has a gross component, which we all know when we look at it, we see it. It also has a subtle component, which is an energy, which is nadis, energy nerves, and chakras, 7 major ones and 49 minor ones. And evolution is about the growth through these chakras, through these nadis.
So how did you move from the root chakra to the second chakra, and what was that about?
Well, I was in the root chakra for quite a while, I think probably 10 to 12 years at least, which was really just landing into a body and becoming stabilized in it, in my consciousness. And how did I move onwards? I think like all teenagers, I wanted to belong. I wanted to feel accepted. I wanted to be part of something bigger. And I had this underlying sense that this was a spiritual sense of being bigger and belonging. So I started looking around, found some books, read them. My sister, as I mentioned before, was into psychic mediumship. So she had some interesting books on meditation and started to practice that. And at some point, I became much more involved in Judaism. I was raised in, my parents were not religious in any way, but I did have a bar mitzvah, a rite of passage at 13 years old, and put myself very much into this group consciousness, this sense that I was a Jew and I belonged here, and there were rituals and laws and rules, and there was a process of growing and becoming more closer to God. So I studied Hebrew, and I joined groups and became interested in Judaism post my bar mitzvah. That was, in a way, moving into the second chakra. The second chakra is associated with tribalism, becoming part of a tribe, a group. So this group might be small, 2 people, and might be huge, like Christianity. But it has certain ways of functioning, which is rule-based and belonging. Those who are inside of it get special treatment and belong at a higher level. And those who are not inside the cult. And I say cult in a broad sense, because some cults are 15 people or 20 people, and they have their own rules as well. So how did I move into this? I think I moved into it because of my background from my previous lifetime, because there was a part of me that instinctively wanted to have the full human experience. So I needed to be part of a group, a cult, and that was important in terms of my development as a human being.
So when you say cult, there's a whole spectrum of spiritual and religious groups, from very loosely knit, not a lot of rules, to more tightly defined, to authoritarian and cult-like, where people are taught how to think and how to behave. And so are the members of all of these in the second chakra?
Well, one can be solidly into the second chakra. And some people really adopt it and are in the center of it, like they have a guru and a group that they belong to, that they leave the rest of the human development. They leave their home, they leave their family, they leave their belonging, they give up their possessions and their ambition and their careers. And that can be very intense. And then there are those that are more on the fringes, and those that are in the middle. So on the fringes, in the sense of they belong to the group, but they don't identify 100% with the core values, just most of them. You know, cults to me is a broad term, but it describes, for example, sports, a sport belonging to a football club, or focusing on a team, or being politically extreme, belonging to a political group in a deep sense. And this has rules and traditions and functioning and right and wrong according to the group, not according to the bigger culture.
So the sense I'm getting is it's about identity.
Correct. It's identifying yourself as being part of a group. Your survival depends on the group. So, for example, the first chakra has more identification with cavemen or women. It's a survival orientation, small group. But the second chakra, the energy movement into that second chakra is more about identifying as part of a larger group, or a group with more rules. And most of humanity is in this particular category. And we're particularly seeing it now with the political and social issues that are going on.
Yeah, so of course I'm thinking of the Trump cult, but there are also other subsets of identities, racial identity, ethnic identity, age identity, and all of these are becoming more explicit now. And is that a reflection of this of the grip of this chakra and the collective?
Yes. My awareness tells me that 65% of humanity is gripped by a cult mentality. So it belongs to a cult and experiences themselves as being part of a cult. So the people around the cult are bewildered mainly by the mystery of how people can actually think a certain way and feel a certain way and belong in a certain way, which seems kind of ridiculous to the outsider. Makes no logical or reasonable sense. But it does give spiritual depth and does give passion and does convey a sense of belonging to the participants.
And meaning.
And meaning. And it's an important part of human development, just like the first chakra is an important part. And one needs to go through it and participate in it as reasonably fully as possible in order to move on to higher levels.
So in my book, Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path, I wrote extensively about how people leave groups, how they begin to separate and reconnect with their authentic individuality. How did you leave this Jewish community that ended up being cult-like?
Yeah, this is a particular moment that keeps repeating itself as I leave one stage and move on to another. I remember lying in bed in my parents' home and wanting to read a book. It was Friday night, and according to the Orthodox religious Jewish organization group, you don't switch on the lights on the Sabbath, and Friday night is the Sabbath. I really wanted to read that book. So I started to question, and I think this was part of my education at university, which I had begun a year or so before, that I began to think more objectively and consider alternatives and complexity of identity. And I asked myself the question from this perspective was, did I really think that this rule was something I would be punished for if I crossed the line? And I got the awareness that this was not in truth reality, that nobody's going to punish me for switching on the light, God or anybody else. So I went and switched on the light and gave up the garb of being a religious Jew, because once there was one part of that identity that fell apart and fell away, it all fell away. And this was part of thinking for myself and moving into being an individual. So my identity moved from being part of a collective to being more of an individual with my own thoughts and ideas. So, for example, a part of me may have some conservative values and some liberal values. That doesn't mean that I belong in a conservative tradition or a liberal tradition. I'm an individual. And that was the movement of consciousness. So away from collective thinking to individual thinking, individual belonging.
I remember at that time you were studying accounting. So that must have been in contradistinction to the mysticism as well.
Yeah, well, it was very logical and systemic models of reality that were constructed to form a holistic sense of how you add things together and how you present them. And that gave me a sense of inquiry into questioning narrow thinking and moving. And it was sort of moving into the third chakra, chakra of thinking and logic and independence, and there for myself.
And you kind of made an allusion to, you saw a repeating pattern with each step of your evolution. So it seems to me like the step here from the second to the third is what in psychology we call separation and individuation out of a group. Jung wrote about secret societies, and that they could be fraternities and sororities, they could be clubs, or they could be interest groups, or they could be, and that they were a transitional stage from childhood family life into independent adulthood. And in a way, I think there's a similarity here where you're describing the second chakra as focused on belonging and groupthink and not yet ready for prime time individuality. But then something happens. You switched on the light.
Yes.
Both physically and metaphorically.
Yes.
And with that came a new awareness.
Yes. Thinking for myself.
Independent thinking, more authentic feeling, more reclaiming of parts of yourself that might have been lost to the group.
Yeah, well, it never developed out of the family. Just got projected onto a group. Like, the group was in a form, my family projected onto a more higher level. So going to a place where I could think for myself and was educated to do so was a very important step in human development.
And for some people, it doesn't mean they leave their communities. Some people can cultivate independent thinking inside of a community, but if it's cult-like, then that's very hard to do.
Yeah, there's a big difference between cult and community.
Yeah.
Community is a lot of individuals who belong in a group that they can identify, at least in part, with, that supports their independence and separateness. So community is really the next stage.
Okay, so now you're landing in the third chakra.
Yes.
The hara, the belly center.
And becoming more involved in that chakra, in that belly center. So that groups become part of individuality, and individuality becomes more flexible and more full of contradictions and different constructs of what reality looks like and what individuality looks like and identity looks like.
So are you saying more capacity to hold contradiction and complexity?
Yes.
And isn't the third center about personal power?
Yeah, it's all about the sense of identity as being personal. I used to belong in a family, and I was identified as being a son of parents and a sibling of my brothers and sister, and then I moved to a place of being part of the religious society, and then I moved to a part of being an individual.
And so do you remember what that was like when you were centered in the third chakra?
Yeah, I found choices. What career should I do? Should I follow? What did I believe in, not what did my group believe in? What were the things that helped me to identify with friends and groups without losing myself? Which ones gave me enough freedom to explore who I was?
So that became a higher value. That freedom to explore became a higher value. What age were you then?
Well, it was over a period of time. So I'd say it started in young 20s and shifted to 27, 28.
Okay. And so you're still in South Africa at this point.
Yeah, I left South Africa when I was 28.
And did you know about chakras then?
Yes. I did study Hinduism and Vedanta and read about Buddhism and was interested in these areas. And I was meditating regularly.
Okay. Is there anything else that stands out about the experience of the third chakra that people can identify in themselves? It sounds like it's about ego development, what I believe, what I want, what I need.
It's about the complexity of the individual. And it's where humanity is evolving into. So humanity is mainly in the second chakra, in the sense of tribalism. But it's evolving into, and this is a cycle that goes forward and backwards and forwards a little deeper. So it takes time and maybe hundreds of years to really evolve fully for the average person, for the average, for humanity as an average.
So how did you move from the third to the fourth chakra?
Well, when I was 28, I moved to the United States. And United States philosophy is one of inclusion. There are many, many different groups that come to America, and they're all part of a culture that has a philosophy of inclusion. Although this seems to be going backwards right now, but
this is the 1980s we're talking about, right?
This is the 1980s.
Yeah.
1983, I moved here. So, so the philosophy of free speech, of free thinking, of belonging, of being able to work as long as you can work and make money and produce. It doesn't matter what your religion is or what your philosophy is or what your group is. So the influence of the United States on me was immense and moved me in some ways into the beginning of identifying as a human being rather than as a South African or a Jew or a Hindu or a part of a culture, a group. So it was the beginning. I think the other part that really moved me was my career as a psychologist, which has its own set of rules for behavior. So psychologists have a code of ethics that one needs to belong to and can be disciplined by. And the ethics and the code is broad-based. It's about putting yourself aside, putting the third chakra, the independence aside, and being there for another being, another person, or having empathy for them, or having a sense of care, and having
Learning to be other-centered.
learning to be other-centered, but other-centered in a way of caring and putting yourself aside. And that's an immensely good training if you want to evolve from the second to the third to the fourth chakra. So the training is highly disciplined and important that you move your consciousness to being one with humanity and supporting individuality, even if you disagree with it. So a client could come and see me and say, and this happened. Client came to see me and told me that she had arranged to have someone killed, which is a horrific thing. But it was in confidence. I had to keep it secret. And I had to be there for her while she was exploring this part of herself and how she felt horrified about it. And explored that this was part of being a human being as well, that there were such things as murder. So that's an example of moving into the heart chakra or center, being human.
Despite the intention or the action of the other person.
Right. Your role is to support them in becoming a healthy part of the culture, a healthy part of being human, to being the best person they could be.
Okay, do you have any other experiences of the fourth chakra that would be helpful?
Well, the training is immense as a psychologist, and I was also licensed as a marriage and family therapist as well, as a clinical and organizational psychologist. So I had this experience of doing this in business, being an organizational psychologist, and helping businesses become more ethical and grow and become more caring for the variety of people in their organization.
But Neil, I think there are psychologists who have the same training who don't experience the opening of the fourth chakra.
No, it doesn't mean that you're going to go through this process. I mean, there's got to be something that moves you. So what moved me into the fourth chakra was emigration. It was shocking and somewhat traumatizing because everything I knew and identified with was gone. Even my language was not fully understood by Americans. The tonality interfered with people understanding what I was saying. The sense of survival was questioned because I could run out of money. I could not become integrated into the culture. Maybe I wouldn't be able to get my citizenship eventually. So there was a shocking transition. And I was actually leaving South Africa in a way that was not one opportunity of returning because I was against the culture in South Africa, which was about
the apartheid government.
Correct. And so I could not go back, not just because I didn't want to, but because I did not do the military service that was required for white males.
So again, there are many people who immigrate and don't open their fourth chakras. So these experiences were formative for you, but I'm wondering if there was something else going on. From one of our teachers, we learned that Kundalini rises, there are spontaneous Kundalini risings that open these chakras that may be independent of these kind of traumatic experiences, independent of spiritual practices. They just happen. And they happen in different ways in different people. And I'm just wondering if it was your Kundalini rising that allowed these experiences to be so transformative.
There's a way of looking at it that's a structural model, which is more aligned with the third chakra. It's a way of thinking that is systemic and organized. That human development and spiritual development happens in that way. I have a different perception of it, which is I'm a soul. That's part of my identity. Being a soul and realizing myself as being awake, as being enlightened, was always in the background and was always pushing me, just like my mother was pushing me to become more awake, more enlightened. So there was a force behind me and events in life that were part of what I call soul awareness. So most people think of the soul as something that happens to you when you die. When you die, your body dies and your soul goes to heaven. But for me, the soul is always there. Soul is always guiding development, guiding your consciousness, guiding your role, because it's a direct expression of the divine. So it's always pushing you to become more. So that's more of why I think it happened to me rather than somebody else was because there was the trauma of transition and there was the soul guiding me in a certain direction. And because nothing happens by chance, everything is organized in some subtle way. So coming to the United States was not by chance, it was part of a plan. And looking back, I can see that when I was looking forward, it was like, how do I get to go to the United States? It's the best country in the world to go and live in. And it was in the 1980s.
And so was there a disillusionment with that?
With the United States?
Yeah.
Yes, that was when my awareness moved from the fourth chakra, the heart, to the fifth one, being part of humanity and being part of the earth. It was disillusionment because I became aware of the prejudices, the bigotry, the closed-mindedness, and the meanness that existed in the culture, and the fact that there were so many individuals in this culture, political, social, religious, who were prejudiced and were not living to their highest truth.
And so there was this gap between the ideals that you loved when you arrived and the reality.
Yeah, I think as I became part of the culture and I discovered that being an American had its handicaps. And while I was not in any position that I wanted to give it up, in fact, each step is really about transcending and including what happened in the past. It was still true of moving from the fourth chakra to the fifth chakra.
So the light got switched on again.
Yes.
And then what happens at the fifth chakra?
At the fifth chakra, you belong as a part of the planet. So I spent about a decade traveling the world. And I've been to more than 100 countries. I stopped counting at around about 100. And my journey was really about exploring each place that I went to and discovering what was unique about it, what was special about it. How did people make money? How did they get married? How many children did they have? What was their beliefs and values? And so the notion of having one humanity with one belief system, or a planet with only certain plants or vegetables, or dissolved, and I found myself identified more with the planet as a whole rather than just the human side of it. So there were many, many different things that touched me. And I think the traveling really made a big difference, and I was driven to travel.
Okay. And then how did it take the big leap into the sixth chakra?
Well, I always knew that when I reached 49, I would return to being far more intensive about my spiritual practice. So I had sort of dropped off of the intensity when I got married, the first marriage, and I still meditated, but I was far less intense. So at 49, there was something because my children had left home, and there was more time, and I traveled the world already. There was more time to spend in pursuit of the inner world. And the inner world was once again more complex than the outer world. Opposites were not as much in contradiction as much as part of the whole.
What can you describe as experiences of the third eye or the sixth chakra?
I think there are psychic experiences. So there are experiences of being able to perceive things that are hidden from usual vision or understanding. And the subtle senses, a sense of touch, for example. You could feel the energy coming off of another person. the sense of sight. You could see into another person's energy field. Also, the sense of psychological opposites, like what Jung would say. There was a sense that psychological opposites were part of the whole, and that every point of view had an opposite one as well.
A shadow side.
A shadow side. And every shadow side had a
light side.
Light side. So the movement away from a sense of whole, a sense of complexity, which was in conflict, became one of a complexity that was in harmony with the different parts. And that was part of the sort of disillusionment of the United States.
What was part of it?
Moving to the idea that the differences were part of the complex wholeness.
So I have this, conception that sixth chakra experiences are flashy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what everybody wants. Open your third eye, the doors of perception. It's going to be like you're on acid. And that's not what I'm hearing from you.
No, it's not like that at all. I mean, that's an experience, not a level. It's an experience. If you can have an experience, if you take LSD, you can have a third eye experience, but it won't last. It'll be gone. Reminds me of the story of Ramdas, who was a psychologist back in the 60s and 70s, who decided to take LSD every day, many, many times, to try to establish that open perception, because he got there on it and he never could maintain it using those methods.
So there's a kind of a basic principle that you can experience any state at any level of consciousness.
Yes.
You could be in the second chakra level of consciousness and have a high experience of unity with everyone,
right,
that then fades.
Yeah. For example, that's the truth. For example, if one goes into cults that have a guru and a spiritual path, one can experience some very high states. Although, in truth, you're part of a tribe. You're a second chakra being. You're not a sixth chakra being. You're not part of something that's higher than that. And I think a lot of people get confused and get mixed up about this idea that a high experience is enlightenment. It's not enlightenment. It's a high experience. And one can have it at any point.
And so some of the spiritual teachers have a high experience of a high state, and then they think they're ready to teach.
Most of them.
But they're actually not established in the upper chakras.
Most of the spiritual teachers, the rabbis, the priests, the gurus, most of them can fall very easily into greed, money, can fall very easily into sex that's inappropriate, can fall very easily into fighting and having arguments and having power struggles, and do. In fact, it's hard to see anybody belongs in a cult who doesn't have some of that going on. And the whole reason for me to come back and be a human being again is do the human journey fully and completely as much as possible, so that I don't fall again into those holes. So, so that I go through the process of ethical and moral values and becoming more.
Ken Wilber calls it lines of development.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can be with an open sixth chakra, even established at that level of consciousness, but not have a conscience or not have intellectual, cognitive development, never read books, just lived like a Swami in the streets. Or have, like one teacher we met in India, have a very high spiritual development, upper chakras all the way, but have no relational capacity because he was a sadhu all his life and he didn't have relationships. And so he was rude and contemptuous and all that. So what I'm hearing you say is the Kundalini evolution through the chakras doesn't necessarily mean that all these lines of development get fully cultivated into a human being.
Yes, so you've used certain terms like Kundalini, which is, it's a certain energies pathway that we assign to going up the chakras from the base of the spine, energetically all the way.
So we were talking about how the chakras can open, but the lines of development may be derailed or incomplete. And that's one of the reasons that so many teachers fall into their shadows.
Well, the main reason why people fall into the shadow side is because they don't go beyond the second or the third chakra. So if you go to any of the religious orientations, the very long-term traditional ones tend to take you step by step through each one of these levels and stages because they recognize you need to have them all. But those that don't, which seems to be most of the spiritual lines, fall into the hole. So the gurus are having sex with their students, manipulating them to get money because they haven't really done the work to open up those bottom chakras, even though they might have tremendous energy. They might be able to actually impart a high level of consciousness, but they're still immoral. They're still not developed as human beings.
Yeah, they act out the pockets of ignorance that remain. So coming back to you.
Yes.
So we spoke earlier about the knower. Is the knower connected to the sixth chakra?
No, it's connected to the eighth chakra.
Okay. So is there anything more to say about the sixth chakra? I mean, you have a certain kind of clairvoyance. You can see things in other planes.
Yes.
You can see people dying. You can see past lives and future things. You can see back to the Big Bang. Is that the sixth chakra?
No, that's the knower.
Ah, okay. So is there anything more to say about the sixth chakra?
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots to say about it, but
in your experience?
Not right now, not at this moment. The knower has been my path since I was in the 20s, because it became associated with truth and has organs of perception. It can see, it can hear, it can touch, it can feel. It's part of the non-duality, not part of duality. Today we've been talking about duality. Duality meaning that there's a sense of I and you, or me and other, or we, that's going on, that is dual.
At what chakra does non-dual reality click in?
Well, the first experience of it is the seventh chakra, the one that's on top of the head.
Okay, let's go there.
So that's I think we should pick this up another time, because we're opening a door to a whole another level. So far, we've done the human story today, and if we step into the seventh chakra, we're starting the divine story.
Ah,
The divine story is the nature of divinity as it unfolds to higher and higher levels, and there is no end.
the next podcast will describe Dr. Neal's evolution through the seventh chakra and beyond to the higher chakras in the divine world. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in today. If you found our discussion insightful, there's a good chance your friends will too. And we'd love it if you could take a moment to share this episode with a friend who you believe would appreciate it. Help us spread the word and reach more people. And follow us on any platform. Turn on your episode notifications so you never miss new content. Thanks for being part of our podcasting journey.